Welcome to the Peter King Podcast, the sort of free agency, weird week of movement edition of the podcast. Happy to be joined, as always, by my partner, Myles Simmons. And, we are going to spend about a third of our time on the two vagabond quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers and Lamar Jackson. And I think I mean vagabond in a good way. Then we're going to hear from CJ Stroud, my guest on this week's podcast, the Ohio State quarterback. Then we are going to go over the 6 most notable things, at least in our opinion, Myles Simmons, Peter King, in our opinion, in the first couple days of this open market. So in no particular order, Jimmy G to the Raiders. That is a good story, fairly fascinating. The short-termer who he is replacing, Jarrett Stidham, to the Broncos in a major surprise, along with Mike McGlinchey. The Dolphins trade for Jalen Ramsey. We're going to go over why that fits for both franchises. And I want to get into why in the world Mike White, who's been a meteor across the NFL sky a little bit over the last 2 years, also signed with the Dolphins, leaving the Jets. Bears running wild, going through the forest, going crazy and making huge trades and trading for DJ Moore, finally giving Justin Fields his number 1 receiver, then going crazy in free agency, spending a lot of money on TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds, to give themselves a huge boost at the linebacker position. The Niners, with the biggest surprise, I thought, they've already got one of the costliest defensive lines in football, and they added Javon Hargrave. So I've got a definite theory on why they went with Javon Hargrave here. And also, sort of an under-the-radar, interesting signing of Sam Darnold to fill out their quarterback room. Poor Sam Darnold. I think he's going to be like this generation's Josh Johnson. He's going to play for like 13 teams. I don't know if he's ever going to accomplish anything really great, but I think he's going to be in a lot of training camps and a lot of camps. And finally, we're going to get into the strange case of a very successful player, Austin Ekeler, who does not want to play for $6 million in 2023 for the Los Angeles Chargers. Myles Simmons, a weird week, I would say, but not an extraordinary week, quite honestly, because there just really wasn't a quality class of free agency to deal with.
Yeah, Peter, and you've been saying that for the last few weeks, that this free agency class just is not necessarily something that we were all going to get excited about. And I think there's good reason for that. But, as you said at the top, the two quarterbacks in Lamar Jackson and Aaron Rodgers are both the most interesting elements of what is going to happen this week and some of what's already happened this week. But I mean, the interesting thing is by the time we stop recording this, who knows where those two stories are going to be, right? And, from that perspective, neither of those guys are technically free agents right now. And, if you want to talk free agency, it's like, okay, well, where's this guy going to go? Where's that guy going to go? But until we know what's going to happen with Lamar Jackson and with Aaron Rodgers, the rest of the dominoes are still just going to kind of stand upright, and we'll see what happens after that.
Well, why don't we start with Lamar Jackson? Because clearly he has been incredibly well discussed, let's just say, over the last 6 months, with this incredulity that the Baltimore Ravens could not get him signed, and the sort of disbelief around the NFL that he really might, even as a restricted free agent, might get to the market. So we're recording this middle of the afternoon Eastern time on Tuesday, March 14. And so on March 15 is the first time that Lamar Jackson can entertain suitors, can talk to other teams if he so chooses. How that will happen is going to be very weird because he does not have an agent, does not have anybody even somewhat representing him, even in a part-time capacity. And so therefore, somebody, if they want to talk to Lamar Jackson and where exactly is that candidate, somebody is going to have to find a way to get to Lamar Jackson. Now, Lamar Jackson, early Tuesday afternoon, put out a tweet in which he basically said, 3 years, $133 million guaranteed, and I need an agent. And so, you can see the tweet right here, and fully guaranteed. But I do want to tell you just a couple of things, and Myles, I'm going to get your feeling on this. But 8 days ago, in my column, I wrote that the only thing left for these two teams was a short-term, fully guaranteed contract. And I suggested 2 years at like $90 million or maybe $92 million, $46 million a year, because very simply, Lamar Jackson seemed to be intractable. And I say seemed to be because none of us have heard it from his mouth, but seemed to be, affixed to getting a fully guaranteed contract only. So I said, okay, if you're the Ravens and you have no other options and you really do want Lamar Jackson to continue being your quarterback, then cut this whole thing in half. Give him a 2-year guaranteed contract, maybe 3, but probably 2, and sell it to Lamar as saying, okay, listen, here's what's going to happen. You're going to be a free agent again at age 28. And if you stay healthy the next 2 years, and, which you have not been able to do the last 2 years, but if you stay healthy the next 2 years, you're going to get far more than you would if we gave you a fully guaranteed contract for the next 5 years, because you'll be somewhere in the 60s, on a fully guaranteed deal starting in 2025. But anyway, so it sounds like that now the Ravens have offered him a 3-year fully guaranteed contract, which I guess I would say, well, sometimes you do stuff that maybe you really don't want to do, but what are your options now? Every one of their other quarterbacks is gone. Every one of their other quarterback choices is gone. The Baltimore Ravens fallback position, I believe, was going to be Jimmy Garoppolo. But in order to be Jimmy Garoppolo, they were going to have to get there at the start of the market. Mm-hmm. And obviously they couldn't do that because they were still hoping to sign Lamar Jackson. So if somehow, some way, Lamar Jackson makes a deal with some other team, the Ravens are absolutely, totally left out in the cold. So to me, this does make sense. And it does sort of follow my sort of, what's the right word to say? The only logic that I could possibly figure out, after last week, which was the only thing that makes any sense is a short-term deal. So if the Ravens have offered him 3 years, I think he ought to take it and just walk back to the team and say, okay, look, we're going to make the best of this for the next 2 or 3 years. And if it just doesn't go well, if we continue to be at some sort of loggerheads, then this will be it. And we'll all move on, say, in 2026.
Yeah, the response I had to that Lamar Jackson tweet was, I'm just not really sure what it means, right? Because we've heard that 133 million fully guaranteed figure from, I think, 3 reports out of ESPN, the latest of which was from Stephen A. Smith on First Take, where he said that Lamar Jackson's camp had called him and explained to him that is what the Ravens' fully guaranteed offer was at signing, right? $133 million. Now, I don't know what the length of that contract was or what have you. So I don't know if that is exactly what Lamar Jackson was responding to or putting out there, or if it was another offer or what. It's sort of, it's very difficult to know exactly what Lamar Jackson was saying because he didn't really provide any further context to that. So I don't know if, we can say if that's fair or if that's not fair, but I think the notion of him sort of shying off, I need an agent because I received this, and I rejected it, or I received this even though I didn't have an agent. Like I said, I don't really know what he means, but I think, frankly, yes, it's good to have an agent in these high leverage situations. And I would go back to something that Charles Robinson of Yahoo Sports wrote late last week, early this week. I can't quite remember exactly when it was, but he talked to several high profile agents, did not name them. And basically they all kind of took us through what it was that they would have said, what it was that they would have done in these kinds of situations for Lamar Jackson. And I mean, I don't know, Peter, but you look at Josh Allen, who gets a contract after 3 years. You look at even Kyler Murray last year, who got a contract after 3 years. And it was basically very clear and made very clear by Kyler Murray's agent that he wasn't going to be playing in 2022 without a new contract, without new money. And so now we're at a place where Lamar Jackson has played 5 years and he doesn't have any new money. Right. And so right now, as he is on the franchise tag, he is slated to make $32 million in 2023. So I don't really know what we're supposed to conclude other than, I mean, I guess Lamar Jackson is now going to be able to talk to other teams and they have an opportunity to present him with different offers and get him a different offer sheet. But I don't know. Peter, I can't help but feeling like, if Lamar Jackson had an agent, and if Lamar Jackson's desire is to stay with Baltimore, then this situation would have been resolved by now, and Lamar Jackson would have gotten new money by now, which he has not gotten because he doesn't have a second contract. It's just, we're in this unique spot. And when he says, and I need an agent, it's kind of, my first reaction is, yeah, I think that you do. Because this is a prime situation and maybe the best example of what an agent can do for you versus what you're doing for yourself, especially as a quarterback in this kind of high leverage spot.
Look, the fact is, Tom Pelissero put this very, very well on the Rich Eisen show one day last week. He put it perfectly. He basically said, look, if he had an agent, the agent never would have allowed him to take the field to play the last 2 years of his contract after winning an MVP at 1.7 and 23 million.
Yes.
So, and there's one other thing about this, Myles, that I think for everybody, Richard Sherman has said this, agents are overrated. You don't need one. Possibly. Okay. But in this particular case, you just raised the best point that many quarterbacks get contracts redone after 3 years if they've had great success in the NFL. And Lamar Jackson, after winning the MVP in 2019, there was nothing he could do in year 3. He had to play year 3 at $1.3 million. It's an NFL rule, nothing you can do about it. However, after that third year, he was very able at that point to do a new contract, which they went back and forth, obviously, with no agent. They couldn't do a new contract. So then he played his fourth year with no new money. An MVP in the National Football League, playing quarterback, who runs around a lot. He played the next year for $1.77 million. Okay, got hurt and missed most of the end of the season. Then he goes in and he plays the fifth-year option year at $23 million. The exact same thing happens. He gets hurt in early December and he's out for the rest of the year. And what is maddening about this, is that there are those out in the player world and fan world who say big deal. He should be able to do whatever he wants to do. Of course he should be. But if the object is to make as much money as you can in your quarterback, or in your career rather, you have to start making the money and turning on the money faucet when you can. And in a quarterback world, a first-round draft pick quarterback world, you can do that after the third year. But Lamar Jackson, instead of turning on the spigot of getting a lot more money and already being in the middle of his second contract right now, he is fighting with very few suitors available on the outside. He is fighting the Ravens now for his first contract after 5 years.
Yeah.
Look, players are allowed to do whatever they want to do. Teams are allowed to do whatever they want to do. But don't act like it's idiotic for people questioning you. It's frankly, it has not been intelligent that a quarterback who has won an MVP award in year 2 of his career would then play the next 3 years without a contract adjustment. That's all there is to it.
Yeah. Well, honestly, Peter, I agree with you, man. I mean, it just doesn't feel right that quarterback would have played the last 3 years without a second deal. And as you said, you're not eligible until after year 3. But this is why, and I've said this many times over the course of this offseason already, if you're Joe Burrow, you're Justin Herbert, or you are Jalen Hurts, you are not taking the field in 2023 without a new contract. Now, whether that contract comes, in April, in May, or in July, when a lot of these deals do get done in that, dead period, which I use quotes for, between mini camp and the start of training camp, and that is when a lot of these quarterback deals get done. Those guys are not participating in the 2023 season without a new deal, right? And part of that is they all have agents who are negotiating those things for them. And the teams know this. They set aside budgets for this. And it's not always going to be cap prohibitive and all these different things because teams figure out ways to manipulate the cap, signing bonuses and void years and all these other different types of things. So we're in this situation right now because Lamar Jackson did not get a new contract after his 3rd year, which frankly, he probably should have. And, whatever happens next, it all to me stems back from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, we've spent a long time seemingly all through this early offseason about Lamar Jackson. I'll just repeat one thing that I've written a couple of times. I've said, and look, I like Lamar Jackson. He is a friendly guy. He is a beacon in his locker room. His teammates love him.
Yeah.
And so I don't say this out of malice in any way, shape, or form. But the fact is, I even think the Ravens, if it's 3 years, $133 million, man, the last 2 years, Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens have had 12 games in December and January. Lamar Jackson has started and finished 1 of the 12. He's missed 34% of the snaps in the last 2 years for the Ravens. And so to fully guarantee his contract over the next 3 years, that is a risky venture for the Baltimore Ravens. However, let's move on. And let's talk a little bit about Aaron Rodgers and where exactly that is. And just before we recorded, Diana Rossini of ESPN had a tweet about what exactly is where they are in the middle of this. And look, it appears as though, Myles, that there is there's no stopping Aaron Rodgers to the Jets now. Not that anybody obviously would want to stop him, because that's the most logical and really the only place that Aaron Rodgers could go right now, okay? And so the tweet from Diana Rossini basically talked about, here are the guys who Aaron Rodgers wants the New York Jets to sign. And 2 of them are wide receivers, Allen Lazard and who am I forgetting?
Randall Cobb.
And Randall Cobb, excuse me. And then the tight end, Mercedes Lewis, all of which is fine and is all well and good. But I would just make this point to Aaron Rodgers. I would just say, look, the New York Jets right now have the offensive rookie of the year in the NFL in Garrett Wilson. They've got another very talented young receiver in Elijah Moore. And this is the thing that drives people crazy about Aaron Rodgers. dude, you're not the general manager. And look, I'm sure the Jets and Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh want Aaron Rodgers to be happy and want him to come in fully excited about this team. And yeah, you need 4 or 5 wide receivers every year. I get that. The Jets have already cut loose Braxton Berrios, so I thought was a really useful puzzle piece. And they've already cut him. So look, I guess there's nothing wrong with saying, okay, Alan Lazard, you're going to be in the mix, and Randall Cobb, you'll play 30% of the snaps. That's all well and good. But look at this team right now. This team has a lot of offensive weapons. And again, look, Aaron Rodgers is only going to be in this position once in his life. I can't imagine him going from team to team from here on out. This is it. This is it. But man, he's not creating a very good first impression, I don't think anyway, with either Jets fans or, quite frankly, probably some people inside the Jets organization.
Well, Peter, I mean, why are we at this point and we still don't really know what Aaron Rodgers wants to do or what he's going to do after he said, I'm not going to hold anybody hostage? And whether or not they've got some under the table deal or whatever, a handshake this, and they're in the Jets and the Packers are still trying to work out compensation. Fine. Whatever. But, all signs are pointing one way, but we still don't know that. And it's just this weird situation where, I guess Aaron Rodgers would like to play with Alan Lazard, and he'd like to play with Randall Cobb still. And then also in that Rossini tweet was that he would like the Jets to target Odell Beckham Jr. That's on his quote unquote wish list, which, okay, great. But why are we acting like Garrett Wilson wasn't the offensive rookie of the year? You brought up more. I mean, Corey Davis is still there. He's pretty talented too. CJ Uzomah is a pretty talented tight end. I mean, he was really good for the Cincinnati Bengals, and then he contributed pretty well to the New York Jets last year too. I mean, I'm just not really understanding exactly everything that you have to do here just to try to make Aaron Rodgers comfortable. He's the one that would be coming to a new team. And frankly, last year, a lot of what the conversation was, oh my gosh, the New York Jets appear to be a quarterback away. Well, if your quarterback is going to come in and the thing is already kind of ready-made and he's familiar with the offensive system, isn't it kind of incumbent upon him to also get familiar with the things that are already there, with the pieces that are already in place? So, I mean, I understand why the amazing thing this.
About the amazing thing about the Odell Beckham, and I appreciate you bringing that up. It totally slipped my mind when we started talking about this. But what's crazy about this is, has Aaron Rodgers followed football over the last 3 years? Do you know what Odell Beckham Jr. in the last 3 years has done? He's averaged 7 games a year, averaged 22 catches per year, averaged 285 yards receiving per year. So let's just think about this. A guy who over the last 3 years has not caught 900 yards worth of balls, who's had 2 ACL surgeries. You're telling the team, I want Odell Beckham Jr. Look at the money you have invested in receivers now. And then you want them, they're already negotiating with Alan Lazard. Okay? Yeah. And you're probably going to bring in the other teacher's pet. I mean, other teachers' pets, plural. I mean, look, this is the way I would do this if I were Joe Douglas. Aaron, I love you. We're not signing Odell Beckham Jr., period.
Yeah.
We're not doing it. Unless he signs for the minimum and everything is an incentive. And at the first sign of him being Odell Beckham Jr., he's gone. He's been a divisive guy often in his career.
And where's he going to play? Again, the Jets have talented receivers already. So why is it that we want to replace these guys who are on the upswing, who can come in there and really get comfortable with you? Maybe some of the most talented receivers you've played with aside from Devontae Adams, as a group, especially, why are we trying to dismantle all of that just in favor of your buddies? I mean, if the reporting is true, then it is what it is. But yeah, I don't know, man. That one kind of baffles me.
Okay. I mean, look, we're going to have plenty of time to talk about Aaron Rodgers. Probably more time than any of us really want to talk about Aaron Rodgers. But we're now going to hear from somebody who is also a quarterback who I don't think is making any demands on any team in the top 5 of this draft other than please pick me. At the scouting combine a couple of weeks ago, I had a chance to spend some time and talk to CJ Stroud of Ohio State. He will hear his name in the first 4 picks of this NFL draft. And now you are going to hear from him and see what kind of judgment you make about Ohio State quarterback CJ Stroud. Here at the scouting combine with CJ Stroud, the quarterback of Ohio State. So, CJ, the combine experience, a lot of people dread it, a lot of people love it. What's been your experience so far?
My experience has been, honestly, I look at it as a blessing. And I've been here for about 3 days now, and of course, you have a lot of things to do, and a lot of things pulling at you, but at the same time, you dream about doing this as a kid, and to be able to be here with some of my other fellow teammates and some people I know around college football, trying to accomplish your dreams, you can do nothing but just be grateful to be here, so that's what I am.
You had a little interaction with Andy Reid here, the Kansas City coach and the Super Bowl champion. What was that like?
It was cool. When I was walking through the hallway, I just had got done with a formal interview with a team, and I seen him, and I didn't see him, and I just felt somebody tap my shoulder. I turned around to Andy Reid, and he usually has a lot of great things to say about me. It was kind of cool. I never thought Andy Reid would know who I was, so just to talk to a legend for a little while, he gave me some advice, and yeah, it was pretty cool.
Andy Reid should know who you are. You played quarterback at Ohio State. You're going to be picked in the first round of the draft. You need to up your bar of expectations of what people think about you.
Yeah, I don't know. I like to stay humble, man. I don't want to walk around acting like everybody know me. I'm just my own little self in the empire. So that's kind of how I am. I'm just very chill, just kind of laid back.
Your path to this place is a little different from a lot of quarterbacks. Okay, tell me about being a quarterback in Southern California and how that may have prepared you for this moment.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of ups, a lot of downs, but coming from Southern California where a lot of people say quarterbacks are bred, that's tough because at the end of the day, you're competing against somebody every day. And not only in California, but across the country, because people look at California and they want to knock us off. So that's something that I took to heart, and I went to work every day in high school trying to get better and better. And for a while, I was kind of overlooked. And I just knew one day I would get my opportunity. I wasn't going to let the opportunity pass. And so when that opportunity came, I took full advantage and balled out. So yeah, I'm blessed to be here now because of the hard work I put in before, and I'll continue to put in that work.
How much did playing at Ohio State prepare you for this? Big crowds, big moments, big games, your game against Georgia this year. How did that prepare you for now?
It prepared me for, like you said, everything. Not only just games and throwing the ball and things like that, but just media, dealing with fans, signing autographs, just like little stuff like that, to where you wouldn't think that it would really matter going to a school, but it does, because it prepares you for that next level. Because Ohio State's a mini NFL team, so the way our fan base is based, and then the way you're expected to play, so a lot of high expectations. And for me, that's how you want it, and it's a blessing, and you just gotta be happy with it and be grateful. So I really appreciate Ohio State, all the coaches, and everybody preparing me to be here. Because without them, I wouldn't be ready. So Ohio State definitely was a big help.
A lot of people, Chris Olave told me last year that Ohio State basically, just like what you said, it's almost like a 33rd franchise, in the NFL. And look, there are other schools like that, Alabama, Clemson, everything like that. Do you
from what you've been told, from what you know, do you think the leap will be smaller for you because you played at such a high level in college?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't really know going into it. I don't want to have any expectations or trying to like jinx myself. So I'm just gonna kind of go on with the mindset I have, and that's just being confident and being humble, and kind of have those blinders on my eyes and try to just work. Not to beat anybody else, but try to be the best version of myself every day. That's something that our culture at Ohio State is. Our culture, our motto is fight. And that's something Coach Day puts into it, to just fight to be the best version of yourself every day, which is the hardest thing, because you look in the mirror and can you really look back at yourself and say, okay, I went 100% today, or I got better in this area that I was looking to get better at. And I feel like in the NFL, that's what it's about. It's about looking yourself in the mirror, fighting adversity, fighting those failures. And I feel like Ohio State does kind of get you ready because you're playing at the biggest stage every week. Everybody's watching, everybody's talking. So it has some positives and some similarities, but I don't want to just kind of assume that it's going to be just like Ohio State. I want to go in there and enjoy it and find the love in the NFL, whatever team I go to.
Do you find yourself thinking about competing with the other quarterbacks like Bryce Young, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson? Do you watch them and do you say, here's how I stack up against them? How do you feel about your competitors to go high in the first round?
Yeah, for me, I mean, one thing that I'm blessed to be able to kind of have a similar background to this type of environment. Of course, like you said earlier, coming from California, and me, Bryce, and DJ, really, we're all in the same class and age. So that was like my mini combine back in the day. Was going to camps with them.
You went to the Elite 11 with them?
Yes, sir. Yeah. The Elite 11 and like Bibles, things like that. So this is important to me. And one thing that I pride myself on is not focusing really on anybody else, and kind of just focus on what I do and try to be the best version of myself. So, and it's hard to do that because everybody wants you to dog the other guy and compete, and all those things are great and fun. But I think when you got pads on, that's the time for that. And for this is shorts and shorts, and this route's on there, man. So you got to be good around on there. If you're not good around on there, I don't know what to tell you. So I'm not really trying to wow nobody. Of course, I want to throw the ball really well, and I feel like I will, but I definitely...
What was your decision to throw here? Because some guys come here and they don't want to throw.
I'm dreaming about doing this my whole life, so why not? I'm not scared to throw. I'm not scared of competition. I'm not scared to be out there with other guys. And at the end of the day, like, it's like going to the park. If you ask me, it's like seeing that receiver at the park that you see, like, ooh, he fast. I mean, ask me if he plays football and he wants to throw with me. And that's something I did as a kid, so I'm going to go do it on Saturday, and I'm excited to do that.
Last thing, tell me, what is the message you want to get across when you have meetings with teams? What do you want them to know about CJ Stroud?
Yeah, first and foremost, I just want them to know the foundation that my family said, and that's my faith, and that's like the forefront of my life. And of course, I'm not perfect, but I try to get better every day at it, and I pray, and I do different things like that, and I try to encourage people to follow Christ. So that's the first and foremost thing, and after that, I just want to be myself. I want to show my personality. I want to show that I'm unapologetic myself, no matter what the room is like, who you are. I'm going to be myself, and I think that's a positive person who wants to be great at the sport. And I think every meeting I've had so far, the teams have taught that. And I, of course, try to show my intelligence when it comes to football, because I do think my IQ is very high, and that I know a lot about football. But I think I try to also explain how much I can learn, and how much I'm willing to learn. So those are all things I try to go in there with, just pure confidence, but remaining humble at the same time and just having fun.
If you had your choice, who would draft you?
I'm not in a position to answer that. I don't want to go there, but I mean, whatever team does draft me, I mean, you're getting the best version of CJ Stroud and best quarterback in the draft. So.
CJ, have a great career. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our thanks to CJ Stroud for his time, and good luck to him. He's not going to go any lower than number 4 in this draft, and that's going to be a really, really interesting top of the draft to watch for. The amazing thing is that we're not going to spend any time today, because it's been a well-worn topic over the last half week. Really, we're not going to spend any time saying what are the Carolina Panthers going to do in the draft. We'll have plenty of chances to do that in the coming weeks. But for now, let's hit what has happened in the last day or two and try to project a few things going forward. Myles, my first thought when I saw Jimmy Garoppolo to the Raiders is, in the column right after the Combine, this was my guess, that Garoppolo would go to the Raiders for a very simple reason. I don't think the Raiders had the kind of conviction about the quarterbacks in this draft that would cause them to ruin their next 3 drafts just to get a quarterback. And they felt they were too far away than just going to draft a quarterback and trying to scotch tape everything else together. So they wanted to get the veteran quarterback who they trusted, who they were familiar with. And look, this is the reason why I can guarantee the Raiders are not happy about losing Jarrett Stidham, because very simply, they know that Jimmy Garoppolo has a big injury history, and they really wanted a high-quality backup for him coming in. So they don't get that, but they do get Jimmy Garoppolo. And to me, I know all the stuff that Garoppolo can't do. He doesn't have that great, big, deep arm, but he's played in a bunch of very big games. His team has won a lot of very big games. And I like this move for the Raiders because I think mentally and kind of in every other way, I do think that Josh McDaniels is going to have a better sort of mind meld with Jimmy Garoppolo than he had with Derek Carr.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. I mean, and I don't necessarily mean this in a bad or pejorative way, but Derek Carr had a lot of baggage with the Raiders franchise. I mean, he was their quarterback for 9 seasons, and he's played through different regimes and through all kinds of changes in a very tumultuous 2021 season. And so now when you bring in a Josh McDaniels last year, it was clear, I mean, despite the way they talked about each other publicly, that things were just not working. They weren't quite clicking between Derek Carr and Josh McDaniels. You're not going to have that problem here in 2023 with Jimmy Garoppolo. And Peter, I think you bring up a good point about the lack of conviction in quarterbacks in this class, because I believe it was Dave Ziegler and it might have been Josh McDaniels. And there's a lot of things that are NFL related going on swimming in my brain right now. So I apologize if I get it wrong. But one of them basically said in the last month or so that this quarterback solution, the long-term solution, may not come this year. And so when you sign somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo, I think that really speaks to the fact that you may think that, okay, if somebody falls to us where we land in the draft in the top 10, then we might pick that guy, right? And if it's Anthony Richardson, if it's Will Levis, great. But we don't want to be hamstrung into doing that or handcuffed into doing that or whatever you want to say. We know that if we have Jimmy Garoppolo, we're at least going to have a viable starter. And if it does end up being Anthony Richardson or Will Levis and we have them and they can come in and they can sit back, they can learn, they're not going to be pressured to play right away, unless, of course, Jimmy Garoppolo gets hurt. But you have that person that can be your starter, that can be that bridge guy. And that's not always a terrible role to be. And I know that everybody, if you're a quarterback, you would prefer to have a little bit more stability. But that's where the Raiders are at this point. They want to get a quarterback that they can eventually grow with, right? That Josh McDaniels can train to be, his guy for the next however many years. And they can compete in Las Vegas and they can compete for championships. But until you get that guy that you are absolutely convinced can be that guy, you need somebody to play quarterback. And by bringing in Jimmy Garoppolo, you have somebody who is familiar with the offense, who is familiar with the coaching, familiar with the language, who has played in those big games and is experienced. I think that that's a good thing for the Las Vegas Raiders, especially because he's going to cost you less against the cap than a Derek Carr.
What is so interesting to me about the Garoppolo contract is that it is incredibly reasonable from the Raiders' standpoint. It's in essence a 2-year, $45 million contract. And to get a guy who has done as much as Garoppolo has done, who's a good veteran presence, who's going to be a great guy to have on your team, incredibly selfless, team guy all the way, in essence, to pay him $22 million for each of the next 2 years and then get into the unguaranteed money in 2025, it's a great deal. The one thing about the Raiders that has just broken while we're doing this podcast, they will lose Darren Waller, their tight end, who a couple of years ago, especially like the last full year of Gruden, he was one of the league's big offensive stars. But over the last 2 years, he's missed 14 games due to injury. He will be signing with, he will be dealt to the New York Giants. And so that is something interesting from the standpoint that it's reasonable money, I think, on the cap this year for the Giants. He'll be in the range of $11 million. And the Giants are taking a chance that Darren Waller at age 31 can stay healthy. But if he can, it's a gigantic weapon for Daniel Jones. And to me, it isn't a very risky deal because it's not huge money. And I'm sure that the Giants have said to Darren Waller, listen, we love you, we want to have you, but, we're not going to redo your deal until we find out, whether you can stay healthy. So that's an interesting move. And I think for the Raiders, it is another way to try to save a little bit of money and to try to get a little bit healthier on offense.
Yeah, and they also have a guy in Foster Moreau who is a pretty talented tight end. And, I covered the Raiders in 2019, so I was around them every day, and you saw Foster Moreau sort of start to get going, and then he got hurt. And that was also the year that Darren Waller broke out. And so, Darren Waller is an incredible story just based on all the things that he has been through in his past with the substance abuse issues, the fact that he could come back and turn himself into one of the league's premier pass catching tight ends. That's remarkable in and of itself. And I think that, him going to the Giants is going to be interesting because it really does give Daniel Jones another weapon, and especially a guy that can be used in the red zone. I'm really interested to see what Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka start cooking up for him, because that is a guy that should be really effective in that offense.
Jarrett Stidham, no longer a Raider. Jarrett Stidham now has signed a free agent contract, or will sign a free agent contract with the Denver Broncos. 2 years, $10 million, I think it is, as well as Mike McGlinchey going to the Broncos. I mean, the headlines in Denver is, in essence, are now with Garrett Bowles at left tackle, Mike McGlinchey at right tackle. That is a top 10 tackle tandem in the NFL right now. And that'll be the biggest thing that the Broncos do in free agency, signing Mike McGlinchey. But the Jarrett Stidham thing absolutely fascinates me because last year, remember, when Derek Carr got benched and either boycotted or was kicked out for the last 2 weeks of the season with the Raiders then had on their schedule the best defense in football, the San Francisco 49ers, with Jarrett Stidham making his first Raiders start. And you think, oh my God, this poor kid. And Jarrett Stidham went out and killed the 49ers. Now, the Raiders lost the game. It was one of these high-scoring affairs. But what was so interesting about it is Jarrett Stidham looked like he'd been doing this for 10 years and totally unafraid, made some great throws in this game. And I can tell you this, Myles Simmons, the Las Vegas Raiders wanted Jarrett Stidham back. And I don't think they were ready to say the job is yours, but they wanted him back, and he definitely was going to be able to compete for the job and all that. So the fact that he went to Denver really does surprise me. And I don't know exactly the inside story about why he did this, because clearly now Russell Wilson has been put on notice. Mm-hmm. We love you. We think you have all the ability in the world, of course, but we cannot have a season out of our quarterback in 2023 that we had in 2022. So what this says to me is that Russell Wilson Don't worry about a thing until about November 1st. But if you stink again, we're playing Jarrett Stidham.
Yeah, and that's the situation that Russell Wilson should be in based on his play in 2022. Look, at Jarrett Stidham, it's interesting because he's going to have the opportunity to back somebody up. And you would think that probably would have been what was going to go on there with the Las Vegas Raiders anyway. But I think perhaps mentally, it's a little bit better to go into a situation where you understand exactly what the role is going to be and you're not going to compete and you're not doing this and you're not doing that. When you might have felt like you kind of won the job with your performances with the Raiders in the last 2 weeks of the season. Whereas now it's like, okay, I'm going to compete in a whole new situation. I'm going to go learn from another one of the best offensive minds in football in Sean Payton. And frankly, there will be probably a good door open at some point, if Russell Wilson plays like he did last year, for me to play and for me to show what I can do with some guys who are pretty talented there in Denver. So I like the opportunity for Stidham, and I like what the Broncos did with adding offensive linemen, because no matter what you do, you're going to have to block people, right? And that is the foundation of offense, is being able to block the people in the trenches better than those people can either rush you or try to defend the run on you. So with Sean Payton, the offense is going to have to be really good, right? We all know that. We all understand that. And they have to be able to build things up from where they were last year, starting with signing offensive linemen and then also getting a backup quarterback who you think may have some potential. I think those are two good things.
Let's now move to the Miami Dolphins. They add a major piece in Jalen Ramsey and a fascinating piece, at least to me, in Mike White. Just 2 sentences or so about Mike White. What really is interesting about this, and why, if I were Mike White, absolutely unequivocally, I would have done this. You know, you could either re-sign with the Jets and be part of a bizarre quarterback room that is going to include Zach Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, or you can actually go somewhere and figure that I have a chance to play at some point this year because of the history with the quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa. And if I do have a chance to play, I'm going to be playing with one of the best offenses in football, with one of the most innovative offensive minds in recent NFL history. I love this move for Mike White. He has shown at times that he can be a good NFL quarterback. So I think this is smart by Chris Grier and the Dolphins. I think Chris Grier is a very underrated GM. And to have made this deal so early in free agency, smart move. But obviously the biggest move is Jalen Ramsey. I know you know Jalen Ramsey. Obviously you formerly worked with the Los Angeles Rams. And, you know, to me, Miles, and what I wrote is that it looks to me that the Rams are all in for 2023. The Rams are all in for 2025.
Right. Yes, I think you're right about the Dolphins. Look, they're in a window right now where you understand that you have talented players. You understand that your head coach knows what he's doing when it comes to scheming up offense. You brought in arguably the best defensive coordinator in the league in Vic Fangio. And frankly, I think that is good enough right there to make your defense rank, let's call it, I don't know, 5 to 10 spots higher, if not more than that. And frankly, I don't exactly remember what the Dolphins ranked defensively last year. So that's one thing. But bringing in Jalen Ramsey is huge because, and you alluded to this too, he knows the system that Vic Fangio is going to implement because he ran it under Brandon Staley and basically under Raheem Morris once Staley went to go head coach the Chargers for the last couple of years with the Los Angeles Rams. So Vic Fangio is going to understand how to use Jalen Ramsey. They're already going to speak the same language. And I think Jalen Ramsey, you know, despite some of the things that were said about him last year, he's still a very talented player. And you put him across or with, you know, Xavier, it's going to be a really, really good defensive backfield. And they already got Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. I mean, that defense has talent there. They've got pieces. And so I think that should be really exciting. Now, as for Mike White, I love it from him as well, because that is the kind of person that, again, already pretty familiar with the system. Mike LaFleur ran something that's going to be very similar to what Mike McDaniel is going to run down there in Miami. So it's interesting when you have a quarterback who is a quality backup, right? And I don't know about the different weapons that he was playing with there in New York. And yeah, they've got some talent, but look, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are two of the best receivers in football. That is an extremely, extremely good receiver tandem. So you put those guys with him, and the fact that they can run the ball really well. If Tua Tagovailoa happens to miss a couple games, which based on the history, we kind of figured that he will. He's never played more than 13 games in a season, especially now that it's a 17-game season. Those 3-4 games that he might miss, those are huge, huge snaps that Mike White might be able to do and might be able to fill in for you. So, yeah, I really, really like it. Both moves that we're talking about here. And I really like what the Dolphins are doing so far this offseason. They're putting people on notice in the AFC East.
The Dolphins basically, you're trying to figure out how bad they were on defense last year. They were not good on defense. And a lot of that was due to the fact that they had a bad, not that they have a bad secondary. Javon Holland is an excellent young safety. Xavier Howard, a very good corner. But they thought they had solved 2 years ago their cornerback situation by signing Byron Jones in free agency. He's not healthy enough now to go, so they've got to go out and get another premier cornerback because of all the great quarterbacks on their schedule. And, last year, they allowed a touchdown more per game than the Buffalo Bills. And if you're chasing the Buffalo Bills and trying to catch them in the standings, that is a gap you simply must narrow. Let's talk about another gap that is trying to be narrowed, the Chicago Bears. What the Bears have done so far, I think, is a fabulous. It is a tribute, honestly, to a team that understands how far it has to go and how quickly it needs to move to get there. Because if you look at what the Bears have done in less than a week, they have moved up and gotten 2 additional first-round draft choices, 2 additional second-round draft choices, and they've gotten DJ Moore, a top 20 NFL wide receiver. And my feeling about that trade is that, look, you can't have gotten very much more than what they got for it, moving down 8 spots in the first round. So I like what Ryan Poles, the general manager, did. And then, this is a team that was awful. There's some interesting metrics to judge how a defense does. But one of my favorite metrics always has been, can you get off the field on third down? Okay. Yes. And the Chicago defense last year was far and away the worst defense in football at getting off the field on third down. They allowed 49% conversion on third down, far and away the worst in the league. They were one of the worst defenses in football, and what they've done is they've added 2 physical, athletic linebackers who they hope will be sideline to sideline forces, and who are going to need to be sideline to sideline forces. Now, the one thing the Bears won't be able to do this year, I don't think, is to get the kind of edge rusher that they desperately need. But Ryan Poles understands this. Every general manager of a 3-win team obviously understands it. No matter how much cap room you have, no matter how much draft capital you have, you can't fix everything in 1 year. And I think Ryan Poles has done a very good job in fixing a lot in 1 year.
Yeah, it reminds me of another NFC North team in the Detroit Lions, which also sort of has gone through that method of, okay, you can't fix everything in 1 year, but let's start to fix certain things, and then we will continue to try and fix things. And now look at where the Detroit Lions are. And I mean, they have so many good vibes heading into this 2023 season. It's kind of the process that Ryan Poles is on right now in Matt Eberflus with the Chicago Bears. I like what they've done so far this offseason too. And they've got a long way to go in terms of actually making sure that all these things work out, right? Because it's like, he's done a good job of setting the table or maybe buying the groceries or selecting a recipe or whatever, awful analogy you want to use. But you've actually got to go out there and then execute, right? You have to be able to utilize those picks in the right way. I think picking up somebody like a DJ Moore, who is a proven receiver for somebody like Justin Fields, is a great thing. We know already that he can go out there and he doesn't have to just prove himself as a rookie or this or that. Right, you've already got some guys now that can help Justin Fields, but you've still got to be able to build this thing with the right building blocks. And so even though it's set up well, Ryan Poles has got a lot of work to do to make sure this thing actually turns around in the right way. And we'll see if he does it.
Let's look at the 49ers in our remaining, we've got 3 minutes left in our pod. I want to talk about the 49ers for a second. What is so interesting about signing Javon Hargrave is I did the math on this last night. And if you figure the top 4 guys on their defensive line, Eric Armstead, Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, and Javon Kinlaw, their combined cap number this year is going to be $53.5 million. And, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Because my theory on the 49ers is that they know that even if on opening day they have a healthy Brock Purdy and healthy Trey Lance, and one of those 2 guys is the starter, and if absolutely necessary, Sam Darnold is the starter, they know that they're not going to lead the NFL in scoring this year. I mean, they're going to be, if they can be a top 12 offense, Kyle Shanahan should be coach of the year again, and because they're not a great offense right now. Okay. They could be one, but right now they're not. So I'm sure that what John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are thinking, we need to buttress our defense because we may need to play a bunch of 19 to 15 games this year.
Yeah. And I've got no problem with that. You're bolstering what is already your strength. And frankly, that sometimes is the best way of going about doing things. The 49ers have been a great defensive team traditionally under Kyle Shanahan, which is not necessarily something you would expect given Shanahan's prowess as an offensive coach. But for years, they've kind of told us how they want to win. They want to kick people's butt on defense, and then they want to be able to move down the field, run the ball, and kick your butt on offense too, and make the explosive plays when they're there to be made. So, the other part of this too on offense is they're going to have to replace Mike McGlinchey, who obviously we're talking about in going to the Denver Broncos. That's a big loss that they're going to have to deal with. So if they are able to, continue to play to their strength and continue to get that strength even better, I think that sets up well for them.
Let's end the pod with an Austin Ekeler thought. Here's a guy who's led the NFL in touchdowns over the last 2 years, who is a great rushing, receiving weapon for Justin Herbert, who now wants to talk to other teams because he's getting nowhere, apparently, with the Chargers on a new contract. Myles, your thought about Austin Ekeler, and also just your thought about it's hard for veteran running backs to really get a lucrative additional contract after they've gotten the physical torment and beating that a guy like Austin Ekeler has gotten early in his NFL career.
Yeah, and Austin Ekeler is an interesting case because he's going to be 28 next year for the season, and you don't want to say, oh man, 28 as a running back, he's past his prime, and it's this. And he's led the league in touchdowns the last 2 years, 38 touchdowns scored. That's points, man. That's a lot. But also it's kind of like, well, where do you really rate Austin Ekeler when it comes to great running backs in the NFL? He's had over 1,500 yards from scrimmage in each of the last 2 years. Obviously can catch the ball very, very well out of the backfield. But when you have a guy who's catching 100 passes from Justin Herbert, you want to say to yourself, well, is this because of Austin Ekeler's talent, or is this also because the Chargers' offensive scheme was garbage and they didn't throw the ball down the field enough? I think it's a little of column A, but a lot of column B, which is why Joe Lombardi is no longer there, and now they have in Kellen Moore. But if you're Austin Ekeler and you're slated to make about $6 million this season, and the franchise tag is 10, and you've got guys who are going to be probably playing under that if they don't get long-term deals. I'm talking about guys like Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley from the Giants, and you look at your production versus what they're doing, you're right in line with those guys. So I understand why Austin Ekeler wants a third contract now. He in a lot of ways, he's earned it. But at the same time, it's a roster construction question, Peter. And for me, when I think about roster construction and I think about running backs and I think about championship teams, I'm not often going to pay the running back unless, maybe I got a quarterback on a rookie deal around 10 million plus to be that guy, because there are running backs that come out in the draft every year. And I don't feel good about saying this because it's like, oh, I'm totally devaluing the running back, and I don't love that. But it like I said, it's a roster construction question. And especially when the last player in my mind that I have in as a running back who was dominant is Isaiah Pacheco, and he was drafted in the 7th round toward the end of it. I'm kind of like, man, do I really want to have this guy making this much money on my franchise when I know that A, we're going to have to pay Justin Herbert, and B, we've got Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and they should be volume target guys. It's an interesting roster construction question.
Look, the bottom line is this, and Austin Ekeler is one of my favorite guys in the NFL. He's a great interview. He's a good human being. He realizes how fortunate he's been to be where he is in life, after going to a tiny college in Colorado, being a free agent, being the last running back in camp with the Chargers. I mean, the story is really a great story. However, if you're the Chargers, you look at them and you say, $6.8 million, which is what you're going to make this year. That's what we think is fair. Unfortunately, it's not the most fair for a guy who's trying to make as much money as he can in a limited amount of time in the NFL. But the fact is, running back contracts for veteran guys, overpaying running backs is just always been proven to be a mistake. It's unfortunate. It's sad. I agree with you. It's not fair, blah, blah, blah. It is life in the NFL. Running backs get beat up, and then they're not worth as much anymore. But anyway, look, we'll see what happens with Austin Ekeler, and I hope that Justin Herbert still has him with the Chargers. But I don't think with any running back that I'm going wild trying to keep him, because so many running backs are able to come in and play at a high level on day one. Myles, thank you a lot for taking all the time. This was a fun, enjoyable, educational podcast. I think we told people a lot beyond what the headlines have been in free agency. Appreciate everybody joining us. I would assume that next week we're going to be back, and there's a chance we're going to have some closure on those news stories that just keep on giving. Aaron Rodgers and Lamar Jackson. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Peter King Podcast. We'll be back here with more next week.